as you go into chiropractic and you realize that when there's a subluxation, there's darkness, there's entropy, there's chaos, disorder, and disease as a result. There's less than divine light. They're in a condition of less than divine light. You remove that interference, the light shines through at a greater level, and healing has to occur. It has to. I'm going deep into the chiropractic philosophy vault today, but it's not just philosophy. That sounds too much like theory or something that might be something more abstract. I operate from a premise that our philosophy is based on a science, based on a reality that I expect. I go into an adjustment, I go into my clinic, I go into any interaction with a patient with an expectation of this miraculous power of chiropractic going to work inside their body, that there really is a resurrection power in people that we access through the power of a chiropractic adjustment. And so, I don't love the term philosophy. I mean, philosophy, obviously, there's whole degrees around it, and I know it's important, but to me, it's just a fact. The sky is blue, the grass is green, and subluxations kill. And an adjustment brings people back to life. That's how I see it. That's just fact to me. And that's how I present it to people. And that's why they start and they stay and they tell other people about chiropractic, and why we expect to see miracles every day in our clinic. So there's an interesting thing about the word chiropractic. A pastor came up with that word sitting around the table with D.D. Palmer. And so I always thought, this idea that it was chiropraxis by hand only, that seemed too basic. It seemed too secular to have come from a pastor and a guy like D.D. who thought universally like he did. So as I was doing a word search many, many years ago, before, there was such a thing like Google, I was just using an actual piece of software, and I just plugged in the term chiro, and I literally fell back off my seat when the meaning came up, because the meaning was Christ within. So the term chiro literally means Christ within. So there's a thing called a cruciform symbol. So there's a Christian early cruciform symbol that represented the presence of Christ and Christians, called the chiro. It was actually a cross with a hook underneath it. Since these were fishing villages and primarily fishing economies at the time, that hook, was an important part of society back then. And it was a way during Roman persecution, you can mark your home for other Christians so that they can see there were Christians present, that Christ was within. So I can imagine as Dee and Reverend Weed were sitting around talking about what this profession was all about and our philosophy and what would happen through the power of a chiropractic adjustment, as they thought up this idea chiro and hit it, kind of hit it with this idea that it's by hand only, when they really meant the presence of Christ within. And that is powerful, because we talk about this resurrection power, this supernatural force operating within man that just isn't serving people when there's subluxation. And when we go through this powerful art of chiropractic and remove that interference, we release God and man. We release his wisdom, his intelligence to take over the body once again and restore life and health within. And the whole idea in Christianity is that Christ lives in you. So the idea that there be this sort of intersection between the science of chiropractic and the presence of Christ within, as believed within Christianity, believed by Christ's followers, that these things would intersect, and suddenly an adjustment was releasing this power. Man, what an amazing profession they sat down at that table and created. And as time has gone on and we've learned about the impact chiropractic has on organs, cells, tissues, muscles, the brain, you could really start to put together this idea that, wow, when we think about the chiro, Christ within, God's wisdom working within the body, something we will call innate, in the green books, that, man, you can really start to see where as we make that adjustment, we do reconnect man, the physical, with God, the spiritual, to help people achieve their full potential, to go out there and achieve purposes, fulfill a destiny, do everything God intended them to do, live the way God intended them to live, all because of a chiropractic adjustment. So when I say we went deep into the vault, getting into this deep meaning of chiropractic, that's how I've always seen the clinics. The clinics are there to help people fulfill a destiny, not simply get out of pain or even just watch a cancer go away, but really to make a person, a man, a woman, a child, everything they were supposed to be. And there's nothing sadder than what might have been. And subluxation potentially, and I believe in reality, really robs people of what might have been. Another really deep term here is this term subluxation. Once again, I know that this goes back to Didi and BJ. These are deep thinking men. Is it really just sort of this less than a dislocation, a dislocation, as we learned early in chiropractic college, or is it something more meaningful? And so if you study that word, yes, sub is below, but lux is a term. It's on the gates of Cal Berkeley, is fiat lux. So the term lux is divine light. So when you look at sub, it's below, and lux, divine light, and shun, as we learned also in those early days of chiropractic school, a shun and an ation is a condition of. So we look at subluxation, it's a condition of less than divine light. So somebody walks in and their light is not fully shining. Now let's go a little bit deeper here. Hopefully I'm not hurting your brains. Maybe you've already turned this off by now. But when you look at the beginning of Genesis, so theologians will tell you, many will say that if you study Genesis, you understand the whole Bible. And so we look at the time when God came into the picture, says that his spirit brooded over the darkness. And then there was light, there was lux, there was divine light, and then things came into being. That's when the world came into being. And that darkness, that stands for chaos, that stands for disease, that's entropy, that's a lack of order, that's a lack of light. And so light comes into the picture, and then suddenly we go from a condition of less than divine light, the absence of light, to full lux. Let there be light. And the one thing about darkness, the one thing about chaos, disorder, dis-ease, the one thing about darkness is it doesn't have a say in the matter. When light shows up, darkness has to flee. So let's put this together now. So somebody comes in and they're in a condition of less than divine light. The divine light of God, that chiro, that God within, is not able to shine as bright as it's able. And as a result, at a condition of less than divine light in darkness, there's entropy, there's disorder, there's chaos, there's disease. And then we remove that interference to allow full light, full lux, and that light shines and disorder has to flee. Chaos has to flee. Disease has to go because we've made that adjustment. And as you walk in that, it's amazing what can happen. Now, one story as I wrap up, and again, hopefully haven't hurt your brains. Now, I understand, once again, scientifically, not just philosophically, that matter in the world is entropic. There's entropy. So you drop a glass and you've got chaos, disorder, and it disperses. Those little darn glass particles disperse as far as they can go. If you've ever dropped hopefully I'm not the only one that's ever dropped a glass in the kitchen, and those little particles go everywhere. You're vacuuming, 100 yards away in the living room or a bedroom, and there's still little pieces of glass everywhere. That's called entropy. So syntropy is the state of creating order versus entropy, which is chaos. So what's interesting about, for example, you leave a tub full of hot water and it's entropic. It immediately starts to move towards room temperature. So as it sits there, it's constantly in a state of entropy and moving towards just this cool, lukewarm state of the room temperature. But your body is syntropic. You don't want to be approaching room temperature. That means you're dying or dead. So you don't want to be doing that. So your body is constantly creating order. It's taking chaos and putting things into processes and into procedures and into organs functioning with homeostasis and balance. And so that you don't appropriate room temperature, you stay at human body temperature. And that's how you stay alive and healthy. You are a syntropic being, not an entropic being. So now you think about this as you go into chiropractic and you realize that when there's a subluxation, there's darkness, there's entropy, there's chaos, disorder, and disease as a result. There's less than divine light. They're in a condition of less than divine light. You remove that interference, the light shines through at a greater level, and healing has to occur. It has to. It's a law. It's a law of the universe. It's a law of God's. That as I remove the interference and God's power within starts to get that body back under control. You know, God's power is a power of wholeness. It's a power of health. It's a power of homeostasis. It's not a power of disease. It's a power of health and wholeness and vitality. It's not a power of chaos. It's a power of order and well-being. And that's what has to happen every single time. Like Sid Williams used to drop the keys to show that that's just how gravity works. Well, this is how an adjustment works. Every single time there's light going into the body and darkness having to flee. That's just what an adjustment does. So as we wrap this up, I'll just share a story of walking in this. So at the end of a shift, I won't get too deeply into how this moment occurred, but I open up the back door to head out to go home in the back parking lot where my car is. And there's a woman standing there holding her child in her arms. Now, it's not a baby. This is a 7-year-old, and it's from a tall family. So the 7-year-old's about my height because I'm 5'6" with thick socks on. And so, and she's bald and clearly sickly looking and, you know, very skinny and greenish versus a human color. And she says, I've been told by so many people that I need to bring my daughter to see you. They said, don't give up hope until you've seen Dr. Ben. So all I know is I can move the bone and God can do the healing. You know, I suppose I should have been discouraged because that's a pretty tough case. She had stage 4 kidney cancer at 7 years old. I don't know how all this works. I just know there's chiro. I just know there's God within. Maybe it's better that I don't know how it all works, that I just operate off faith and knowing the power of a chiropractic adjustment to restore chiro, God within, for the darkness to flee because the light of Christ now shines. That's all I know. And so I'm like, well, let's get her adjusted and let's see this miracle unfold. And that's all that I said. Began to adjust her. They had already sent her home. She was already had home care. They had sent her home to die. It said there's nothing else they can do. But I expected a miracle, not because of my philosophy, because the sky is blue, the grass is green, subluxations kill, but a chiropractic adjustment releases the light. And so as time went on, you know, she was supposed to die within a few weeks. Here we are 6-7 weeks later, and she's doing better. Here we are 90 days later, and she's now walking in. Hair is growing back because, you know, they're not treating her anymore. And she's now actually that at 90 days, she's a little upset because she wants to go back to school. She wants to start riding a bike. In fact, we made a promise at that moment, or I made a promise to her that I'm going to do a triathlon with you, that you're going to get so well, we'll do a triathlon together, because she knew that I was a triathlete at the time. And what I didn't realize is that when you add the power of chiropractic, as we've discussed on this video today, with a vision, If you ever studied anything from Young E. Cho, who had built the biggest church in history, he talked about the fact that once you begin to pray for something, you've established a vision. You're now pregnant with the future. That within you, like a baby being developed over a matter of months, you're now, through faith, creating a future where this vision you've established gets built, created, and comes to pass in a reality. So when we set that out there with the adjustment and that vision, it even accelerated her faith and my faith and the progress and the healing even more. And sure enough, she was running triathlons. She was doing triathlons a year later. And that's the power of chiropractic. Philosophy, sure. Reality, absolutely. The question is whether or not you'll walk in that truth with that faith, and that the belief is not in you, but it's the chiro, it's the Christ living in people. Bless you all. Remember, with God, all things are possible. And also, remember who you are.